The first light of dawn painted the old brick buildings of Chicago in soft shades of amber and rose, though Alice Robinson barely noticed. Her mornings began before the city's heartbeat found its rhythm, before cars filled the narrow streets and voices spilled into the air. She had long learned that when life offered you little, you must rise early enough to claim what scraps of opportunity you could. Alice's shoes tapped against the cracked pavement as she hurried toward the small elementary school where she worked as an intern teacher. The school itself was modest paint peeling from the wall's windows, clouded by years of dust, but it was a sacred place to Alice. Children filled it with laughter, curiosity, and sometimes tears. And to guide them to hold their small lives steady even for a moment was a calling she could not ignore. She entered the classroom where sunlight filtered through blinds that never quite shut properly. The desks were uneven, some scribbled with the restless doodles of children, yet the space carried a warmth that money could never buy. She smiled as she gathered stacks of reading charts, preparing for the morning. Moments later, the first students burst through the door. Jackson, with a grin too wide for his freckled face. Mila, shy and gentle, clutching her book like a shield. And Tristan already racing to the back, as though the day were a game to be won. Alice Mila tugged on her sleeve, her dark eyes shadowed with worry. "Yes, sweetheart." Alice crouched to meet the girl's gaze. "Bryson won't let me play at recess. He says I'm too slow." Alice's smile softened. "Sometimes people say things because they're having a bad day. Do you ever get cranky when your leg hurts or you're tired?" Mila nodded reluctantly. "Bryson may need a little space. But you," Alice tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear, "you can still try. Play for as long as it feels good. And if it hurts, you can cheer for Tristan and Lila instead. You'll still be part of the game." The girl brightened, her small shoulders relaxing. "Okay. Thanks, Miss Robinson." Alice watched her return to her desk, her heart tugging with a familiar ache. She had been that child once on the outside, waiting for someone to tell her she belonged. Alice's shift at the school ended by late afternoon, but her day was far from over. She left the classroom, exchanged polite farewells with the supervising teacher, and hurried across town to a dimly lit office where numbers ruled the air. The scent of old paper and stale coffee lingered heavy as the weight of unending responsibility. She worked here as a clerk for a tax accountant, sorting receipts and entering figures until the numbers blurred. It wasn't passion. It wasn't joy. But it was survival. Every paycheck was a brick in the fragile foundation of her future. Mr. Henry, the senior accountant, looked up as she entered. His gray hair framed a kind but tired face. "Alice, you're faster than anyone I've ever hired. I don't know how you keep up with your studies, too." Alice offered a polite smile. "It helps to stay busy." He chuckled. "Busy. You're carrying the weight of 2 lives, but you'll make an excellent teacher one day. Don't let this old office swallow you up." She wished she could believe him. Yet the truth was simple: tuition fees did not wait for dreams. That night, Alice returned to her tiny apartment, a space barely larger than a walk-in closet. The wallpaper peeled, the heater rattled, but it was hers. Or at least, it was what she could afford. She collapsed on the worn-out mattress, her body aching, and let silence wrap around her. But silence did not always bring peace. A ping broke through the stillness, an email notification glowing faintly on her cracked laptop screen. She leaned forward, exhaustion slowing her movements, and clicked. The subject line chilled her. "Walk away before it destroys you." Alice frowned. Her heart pounded as her eyes raced over the single sentence inside. "You don't belong where you're going. If you don't stop now, everything you cling to will vanish." Her fingers trembled on the keyboard. No sender she recognized. No clue about its origin. Just a warning carved in digital ink. She shut the laptop, trying to dismiss it as a cruel prank. Yet unease lingered, seeping into her bones. Someone out there was watching her. Someone knew the quiet, unassuming life she had fought to build. The following afternoon, the knock at her door came sharp and sudden, breaking her fragile calm. Alice opened it to find a woman dressed in designer clothes, heels sharp enough to pierce the floor, diamonds glittering at her throat. Victoria Vanderbilt, her stepmother. Alice's heart tightened. Memories flooded back: her father's sudden death, the cold shift in her childhood home, the way Victoria's affection always stopped short of reaching her. "Darling," Victoria said, sweeping into the apartment without waiting for permission. "This place is quaint." She eyed the space with thinly veiled disdain. "My shoeboxes have more charm." Alice folded her arms. "What do you want?" Victoria's smile sharpened. "I'm getting married." The words struck like stones. Alice blinked. "Married, yes, to someone extraordinary. The wedding will be in Santorini next week. A villa overlooking the sea is a ceremony the world will envy." She glanced at Alice's worn textbooks on the table. "And you, my dear, will come with us." Alice shook her head. "I can't. I have classes, my internship, my job." "Don't be dramatic." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Think of it as a vacation. I'll cover your tuition for the semester. All you need to do is show up, smile, and not embarrass me." Alice's voice sharpened. "Why do you suddenly care if I'm there?" Victoria's eyes gleamed. "Because appearances matter. My fiancé is a widower, very well connected. He has a son, too. It would look odd if my stepdaughter didn't attend. Besides," she leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming, "wouldn't your father want you to support our family?" Alice froze. The mention of her father was a blade twisting in her chest. Victoria knew exactly which wound to press. "When does the flight leave?" Alice whispered. "Tomorrow morning." At the airport, Alice stood alone, clutching her ticket like a lifeline. Victoria, Fiona, and Jeremy, her step-siblings, were nowhere in sight. She waited, scanning the crowd, but they never came. Her phone buzzed with a message. "We're already in Santorini. A driver will meet you." Her stomach knotted. They had left her behind deliberately. When she finally arrived at the villa, the contrast between her life and theirs hit with brutal clarity. White stone walls gleamed in the Mediterranean sun. Blue domes mirrored the endless sky, and luxury dripped from every corner. The air smelled of salt and roses, as if paradise had been built on this island. And standing at the entrance was a man she recognized instantly, though she had never met him. His face adorned magazines, business journals, and endless news reports. Alexander King, billionaire, real estate tycoon. The man whispered to be untouchable. He extended his hand with a warmth that startled her. "Alice Robinson, I've heard about you. It's a pleasure." His voice was velvet wrapped around steel, gentle yet commanding. Alice swallowed hard, her mind racing. So this was the man Victoria intended to marry. A man far beyond their world. A man whose shadow stretched across continents. She forced a polite smile. "It's an honor, Mr. King." And as their hands touched briefly, Alice felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Something stirred in her chest for the first time in years, a dangerous and undeniable spark. But she reminded herself of the email, of the warning she had received. Walk away before it destroys you. The sunlight over Santorini was merciless, a blaze of gold that washed the villa in brilliance. White walls shimmered against the sea-blue rooftops, mirrored the sky, and the air carried a salt-kissed breeze. To any visitor, it would have seemed like paradise. Yet for Alice Robinson, every corner of this heaven felt like a cage. Her arrival had not gone unnoticed. Victoria's daughter Fiona greeted her with a calm smile, sharpened into mockery. Finally, here she said, arms crossed, manicured nails gleaming. Try not to embarrass us. Jeremy the son barely looked up from his phone, muttering something about market odds and sports investments. His presence carried the restless air of a gambler, chasing a fortune that never arrived. Victoria glided across the marble floor in designer silk, her voice dripping honey. Alice, darling, you'll be staying in the caretaker's room. Cozy. The word stung, but Alice swallowed her pride. She had not come here for comfort. She had come because she had no choice. Later that evening, she wandered through the villa's patio, where laughter spilled from the dining area. A feast had been laid out, platters of roasted lamb olives glistening with oil, fresh bread steaming under a linen cloth. The family gathered around the table, golden light from the chandeliers dancing across their glasses of wine. Alice lingered on the edge, unsure whether to sit or to fade into the background. That was when his voice cut through the din. Miss Robinson. Alexander King. He stood at the head of the table, the weight of his presence commanding silence. In the light, his features seemed sharper cheekbones, carved from marble eyes, the blue of the Aegean itself. He gestured to an empty seat. Join us. All eyes turned. Fiona's mouth tightened. Victoria's smile froze. Alice hesitated, then slid into the chair. The scent of wine and rosemary enveloped her. Alexander leaned slightly toward her. I hope the journey wasn't too tiring. His tone was polite, but his eyes searched hers with unsettling intensity. I managed, Alice replied softly. Good. His lips curved, not quite a smile, more a quiet acknowledgement. The conversation shifted to wedding plans, floral arrangements, and guest lists. Alice listened in silence, but now and then she felt Alexander's gaze linger. It unsettled her, not because it was unwelcome, but because it felt like he saw far too much. Later that night, unable to sleep, Alice slipped onto the balcony outside her tiny room. The sea spread out endlessly, waves whispering secrets to the shore. She hugged her arms around herself, trying to shake the unease that clung to her. Beautiful view. She startled. Alexander stood a few steps away, his silhouette framed against the moonlight. I didn't mean to frighten you, he said, his voice low. Alice steadied her breath. It's fine. I didn't think anyone else would be awake. I rarely sleep before midnight. Too many thoughts. He paused, his gaze following the horizon. Do you ever feel like the world expects something from you that you're not sure you can give? The question pierced her. She thought of tuition bills, long nights bent over textbooks, and Victoria's manipulative smile. Every day, she admitted. He turned to her, surprise flickering, then something softer. I didn't expect that answer. You asked, she said, her tone steady, despite the tremor in her chest. For a long moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the sea's lullaby. Then Alexander inclined his head. Rest well, Miss Robinson. He walked away, leaving Alice with her pulse racing, her heart tangled in emotions she could not name. The following days unfolded like a carefully staged play. Victoria orchestrated every detail of the upcoming wedding, her voice echoing commands across the villa. Fiona played the role of dutiful daughter, though her eyes revealed resentment. Jeremy drifted in and out, his phone never leaving his hand. Alice remained on the margins, tasked with errands and trivial chores. She fetched fabrics, carried lists, and endured Fiona's barbed comments. Yet somehow, Alexander always seemed to notice. He would ask her opinion on the menu at breakfast, though no one else did. When Fiona flaunted her designer swimsuit at the beach, he asked Alice whether she preferred the quiet of the cliffs. Each question was simple, but the weight behind it was not. It was during one of these days that Alice met his son, Noah King. He was older than she expected, perhaps mid-20s, with the same ocean-blue eyes as his father, but softened by youth. He stood by the grill in the villa's garden, turning skewers of fish, with an ease that suggested comfort in the ordinary. Alice approached hesitantly. "Do you need help?" He looked up and smiled. "Sure. Can you set the table out here?" As they worked side by side, the tension that followed Alice everywhere seemed to ease. Noah was warm and unpretentious. He asked about her studies, listened when she spoke of teaching, and laughed when she confessed she hated math. "My father's world is numbers and deals," Noah said. "I admire anyone who finds joy outside of that." Alice's chest warmed at his words. For the first time since arriving, she felt seen not as an outsider, but as herself. From the patio, she caught Alexander watching them. His expression was unreadable. One evening, Alexander proposed a game to break the stiffness of the blended families. "A simple one," he said. "We take turns guessing each other's favorites, food, music, memories, a way to learn who we are beneath titles." Laughter followed, though tension simmered beneath. "Favorite sport?" Jeremy asked smugly. "Football," Fiona guessed. "Wrong," Jeremy grinned. "Basketball." The game circled questions and guesses, tossed like pebbles into water. When it reached Alice, she hesitated. "It is my favorite hobby, but I rarely get to do it." "Shopping," Fiona sneered. Reading, Noah offered gently. Alice smiled faintly. "Fishing. My father used to take me." A hush fell. The word father seemed to crack the surface. Victoria stiffened her wine glass, trembling just slightly before she set it down. Alexander's gaze lingered on Alice. "Fishing," he repeated, as though storing the word like a secret. The game moved on, but the air had shifted. Alice felt it deep in her bones. The past was never far behind. That night, sleep evaded her once more. She wandered into the villa's library, the scent of old leather and ink surrounding her. She traced the spines of books she could never afford, their gilded titles glowing faintly in the lamplight. "Do you like this room?" Alexander's voice again, soft in the quiet. "Yes," she whispered. "It feels safe." He stepped closer, his presence enveloping her. "Books never betray. People do." Alice turned, meeting his gaze. "And which one do you trust more?" "Neither," he said, though his eyes softened on her face. "But I want to." The words stole her breath. A dangerous confession, masked as idle conversation. Before she could reply, footsteps echoed in the hall. Victoria appeared, her smile brittle. "Alexander, darling, we must discuss the seating chart." Her eyes flicked to Alice, sharp as daggers. "Of course," Alexander said smoothly, though he lingered a moment longer before following his fiancée. Alice remained heart-pounding. She knew then, whatever this was, it was no ordinary entanglement. She had stepped into a storm. As preparations for the wedding grew frantic, Alice discovered whispers of deeper secrets. Jeremy's debts were heavier than anyone admitted. Fiona's jealousy burned brighter, her eyes narrowing each time Alexander so much as spoke to Alice. And Victoria, always smiling, always poised, seemed to tremble when the subject of Alice's late father arose. The email returned to Alice's mind, its words echoing louder. "Walk away before it destroys you." But it was too late. She was already caught in the undertow. And somewhere within her, against every warning, a dangerous hope stirred. Because when Alexander King looked at her, not as a stepdaughter of convenience, not as a pawn in Victoria's play, but as a woman, Alice felt what it meant to be truly seen for the first time. The days in Santorini unfolded like a masquerade ball. Faces smiling, voices polite. Yet something darker lingered beneath the glitter of wealth and the scent of roses. Alice moved through the villa like a shadow her presence tolerated, but never embraced. Every morning brought another task pressed upon her: arranging flowers, carrying lists, delivering notes. She was the ghost servant in a palace that pretended not to notice her. But Alexander noticed. It unsettled her. At breakfast, while Fiona spoke of couture gowns, and Victoria recited menus with military precision, Alice would find his gaze resting upon her. Not openly, never brazen, but in quiet glances, as though he sought her thoughts instead of theirs. Each time Alice lowered her eyes, reminding herself that this man was not hers to think about. He belonged to another woman, her stepmother no less. Yet one evening the fragile lines blurred. The villa's courtyard glowed with lanterns, their golden light trembling against the marble columns. A private dinner had been arranged for family only, though family felt like a cruel word to Alice. She lingered near the edge, folding napkins at Fiona's command, when Alexander's voice rose above the chatter. "Miss Robinson," he said so that all turned. "Come, join us." The words sliced through the air. Fiona's spoon clattered against her plate. Victoria's lips curved, but her eyes narrowed sharp with warning. Alice froze, caught in the net of expectation. To refuse would appear ungracious, to accept a betrayal. But Alexander's gaze held hers steadily, offering no escape. She moved forward, each step echoing louder than her heartbeats. The seat beside him was empty. He pulled it back for her. "You need not serve when you are a guest," he murmured low enough for only her to hear. Her throat tightened. "That depends on who considers me a guest." He almost smiled, but something darker flickered in his expression. "Then let me be the one who decides." Dinner carried on, voices rising and falling in waves, but Alice could taste the change in the air, bitter as unripe fruit. Fiona whispered pointed comments to her brother. Jeremy scoffed openly, and Victoria's laughter rang just too sharp. Yet Alexander remained calm, his questions directed toward Alice, his attention anchoring her. By the night's end, Alice's skin burned under their scrutiny. She escaped to the balcony once more, searching for air. The sea was restless waves colliding against the cliffs, as though echoing her turmoil. She gripped the railing, trying to steady herself. Running away. She turned. Alexander stood in the doorway, shadows cloaking him in mystery. "I needed air," she said, defensive. "Or distance." Her chest tightened. "From what?" "From me." The honesty of it shook her. She wanted to deny it, to retreat into politeness, but the words tangled in her throat. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You feel it too, don't you?" The night seemed to be still around them. The lanterns swayed, but made no sound. Alice's breath caught her pulse hammering. She wanted to speak, to admit the truth she had tried so hard to bury. But footsteps echoed suddenly in the hall. Victoria's silhouette appeared, her laughter filling the silence. "Alexander," she purred, "there you are. I was beginning to think you'd abandoned us." Her eyes darted toward Alice, glinting with triumph. Alice withdrew quickly, slipping past them into the shadows of the villa. She could not afford to linger near the fire. Fire consumed. The next morning, Victoria revealed her claws. Alice was summoned to the terrace, where Victoria sat, sunglasses shielding her eyes, though the sun had barely risen. A cup of coffee steamed at her side. Victoria said, "You are becoming noticeable," her tone silky dangerous. Alice kept her voice even. "I've done nothing. That's the problem." Victoria lowered her glasses, her gaze sharp. "You sit quietly and answer politely, yet somehow Alexander looks at you as if you matter." Alice's stomach nodded. "That's absurd." "Is it?" Victoria leaned closer, perfume thick and suffocating. "Listen carefully, my dear. I built this chance for myself, for us. Alexander King is not just a man. He is salvation, wealth, power, a fortress against the ruin of Jeremy's debts and Fiona's failings. You will not endanger that. Do you understand? Alice met her eyes steady. You mistake me for someone playing your game. Victoria's smile was razor thin. Everyone plays Alice. Some lose faster than others. The words lingered long after Alice left, echoing like a curse. That afternoon, the family toured the small chapel where the wedding would occur. Whitewashed walls, simple wooden pews, and a view of the sea beyond the altar. It was intimate, almost humble, compared to the opulence of the villa. This will do, Victoria declared, though her tone implied it barely passed her standards. Alice lingered near the doorway, tracing the carved wood of a pew. She remembered sitting beside her father in a church years ago, his voice low as he hummed hymns off-key, his arm a steady comfort around her. Grief rose unbidden, sharp as salt water in a wound. A hand touched her shoulder lightly. She turned Alexander. You miss him, he said softly, reading her too easily. She nodded, unable to speak. My mother loved music, he continued. When she died, silence filled every room. I learned then that absence can be louder than presence. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chapel held only the two souls bound by loss, seeking solace in each other's recognition. Alice, he murmured her name, tasting unfamiliar and precious on his tongue. But before anything more could be spoken, Fiona interrupted, her voice bright and false. Father, Mother wants you to look at the floral arrangements. Alexander's hand fell away. The moment shattered. Alice stepped back, swallowing the ache that rose. That night, a storm rolled over the island. Rain lashed the villa's windows. Thunder cracked across the sky. The family gathered in the lounge, laughter. Forced wine poured too freely. Jeremy argued loudly with a bookmaker over the phone. Fiona pouted about canceled plans, and Victoria spun dreams of luxury villas she hoped Alexander would purchase after the wedding. Alice sat apart, a book open but unread. Lightning flashed, illuminating Alexander across the room. His gaze was on her again, steady, unwavering. When the storm eased, Alice slipped out, seeking the library's quiet. She sank into a chair, pressing her face into her hands. Do you always run here when the storm grows loud? She lifted her head. Alexander leaned in the doorway, his shirt open at the collar, his expression unreadable. Why do you follow me? She whispered. Because you never ask for anything yet. You deserve everything. The words shattered her defenses. She rose, heart racing. You don't know me. I know enough, he said, stepping closer. I see the strength it takes to stand alone. I know the courage it takes to endure cruelty without striking back. I see the grace that shines when no one acknowledges it. And I know, his voice dropped lower, that I've never met anyone like you. Alice trembled. The air between them thickened, heavy with everything unspoken. She wanted to step back, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her closer. Alexander. He reached to touch her, then stopped, restraint carved into his features. If I were another man, if circumstances were different. But the words broke there, suspended in silence. And once again fate intervened. The door burst open. Jeremy staggered in, reeking of alcohol and desperation. Alexander, you've got to help me. They're threatening to shut everything down. I need money. Now. Alice froze. Alexander's expression hardened, the moment dissipating like smoke. Not tonight, he said coldly. Jeremy swore, slammed the door, and stumbled out. Alice lowered her gaze, shame flooding her, though the fault was not hers. Alexander sighed, raking a hand through his hair. This family will break itself before the vows are spoken. And Alice, her heart aching, whispered, then maybe the vows should never be spoken. The storm outside faded to a drizzle, but the storm had only begun within the villa. Alice knew then that she was not merely an observer at this wedding, but also an overlooked stepdaughter. She had become far more dangerous, an unwelcome truth in a world built on lies. And if she weren't careful, it would consume her. The morning after the storm broke crisp and bright, as though the island wished to erase the memory of thunder. Sunlight painted the sea with silver gulls wheeled above the cliffs, and the air smelled of rain-soaked earth. Yet inside the villa, unease clung to every surface like damp mist. Alice woke early, restless from dreams that tangled with memories. In them, her father's voice echoed across the waves, calling her name, then fading into silence. She rose before the others stirred, slipping barefoot through the hushed halls. The villa in dawn light seemed less like a palace and more like a labyrinth, each marble corridor leading her deeper into a story she did not belong to. She found herself in the study, a room she rarely entered, its shelves lined with contracts, ledgers, and documents that whispered of fortunes made and lost. The faint scent of leather and ink lingered. Alice moved toward the window, only to glimpse the view, when something on the desk caught her eye. A folder left slightly open. She should have walked away. She told herself so, but curiosity sharpened by unease held her still. She glanced around. The villa slept. Then with hesitant fingers, she pulled the folder closer. Inside were bank statements, names and numbers, and among them, a letter bearing Jeremy's signature. Her pulse quickened as she read, "Outstanding balance, $200,000. Immediate repayment required. Collateral family trust." Alice's stomach dropped. Jeremy hadn't been exaggerating. His gambling had consumed everything. And worse, Victoria must have known. That was why this wedding mattered. Not love, not companionship, survival. She snapped the folder shut, breath unsteady. A floorboard creaked behind her. Alice turned, heart leaping. Alexander stood in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, shadowed by morning light. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," she stammered, her guilt sharp as glass. His gaze dropped to the folder beneath her hand. Silence stretched. Finally, he said quietly, "You've seen too much, haven't you?" Her throat tightened. "I didn't mean to pry. But is it true? The debts." He stepped inside, closing the door. For a moment, the powerful tycoon seemed less like a man of marble, and more like someone burdened by a weight too heavy to carry. "Yes," he admitted. "Jeremy is drowning. Victoria hides it well, but I've known for some time. That's why she clings to this marriage with such desperation." Alice's chest ached. "And do you still plan to go through it?" Alexander's eyes met hers, stormy, conflicted. Because sometimes Alice people build walls of obligation so high, they cannot see the freedom beyond them. Her voice trembled. "But isn't marriage supposed to be love, not obligation?" For a moment, silence burned between them, heavy with unspoken truths. His gaze softened, lingering on her face, and she felt it. The unvoiced answer, the pull neither dared to name. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment. "You should go before anyone sees us." Alice slipped past him, her heart pounding with the rhythm of things forbidden. The villa awoke in frenzy. Victoria commanded florists. Fiona fussed over dresses, and Jeremy muttered into his phone with increasing panic. Alice drifted on the edges, unseen yet suffocated. Every glance from Victoria held suspicion. Every word from Fiona carried venom. At lunch, Victoria leaned close, her smile sugar-coated poison. "Enjoying your stay, Alice? You look pale. Surely you're not overwhelmed. We wouldn't want Alexander to think you ungrateful." Alice forced a calm smile. "I'm fine." "Oh, good." Victoria's eyes glittered, "because I'd hate anyone to mistake your presence here for ambition." The implication sliced sharper than knives. Alice held her tongue, though fire burned in her chest. That evening she escaped again, wandering down the narrow path toward the cliffs. The sun was sinking bleeding gold and crimson into the horizon. She fell onto a stone bench, letting the sea's roar drown her thoughts. Footsteps approached. "I thought I'd find you here," Alexander's voice murmured. Alice didn't turn. "You should stop following me. It will only cause trouble." "Trouble is inevitable," he said, sitting beside her. "But sometimes trouble is the only thing worth chasing." She closed her eyes. "Why are you saying this to me?" "Because I'm tired of silence," he confessed. "I'm tired of pretending this marriage is something it's not. And I'm tired of ignoring what I feel when I look at you." Her breath caught. The air seemed to thicken, charged with everything she dared not believe. Slowly she turned to him, meeting the storm in his gaze. "Alexander." Her voice broke, half warning, half plea. He leaned closer, his words a whisper against the sea's roar. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't feel it too." But she couldn't. The truth pulsed through her veins, undeniable. Before she could answer, a sharp voice pierced the moment. Fiona drawled from the path, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Isn't this cozy?" Alice jerked away, heat flooding her face. Alexander straightened his expression, shuddered. "Father," Fiona said sweetly, "Mother is looking for you, something about the cake order." Alice rose quickly, retreating down the path. Fiona's laughter followed, cold and triumphant. The days leading to the wedding grew darker each hour, pressing Alice deeper into a web she could not escape. The email she had received before the trip echoed louder. "Walk away before it destroys you." But she could not walk away now. For in stolen glances and whispered words, in the brush of Alexander's hand against hers, she had found something worth risking ruin for. One night, unable to bear the suffocation, Alice wandered into town. The narrow streets of Santorini glowed with lanterns, shopkeepers closing stalls, laughter drifting from tavern doors. She moved aimlessly, letting the normalcy soothe her. She found herself drawn to a dusty shelf of journals in a small antique shop. Their covers were cracked pages, yellowed. One in particular caught her eye, a leather-bound book engraved with initials she recognized, J.R., her father's initials. Heart racing, she opened it. Faded ink told of his thoughts, dreams and fears. And in the final pages, a chilling note. "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident. Trust no one, especially her." Alice's hands shook. Her father had known. He had feared for his life. And her, could it mean Victoria? The shopkeeper approached, smiling. "Ah, that belonged to a man who stayed here years ago. He never returned for it, such a shame." Alice purchased the journal with trembling fingers, clutching it like her father's voice reaching across time. Back at the villa, she read by candlelight, each word confirming what she had long suspected. Victoria had not only despised her father, she might have played a hand in his death. Tears blurred the ink, but rage burned beneath. She could not stay silent. Not anymore. The next morning, she sought Alexander in the study. He stood by the window, sunlight casting sharp lines across his face. "I found something," Alice whispered, holding out the journal. He took it, brows furrowing as he read. His jaw tightened, his hands clenching the leather. "This changes everything," he said grimly. Alice's voice trembled. "You can't marry her, not after this." He looked at her, eyes blazing with conflict. "If what this says is true, Victoria is dangerous. But exposing her now would ignite a scandal that could destroy more than just her. Then let it burn," Alice whispered fiercely, "because the truth matters more than appearances." Their eyes locked, the weight of choice pressing heavily between them. For the first time, Alexander reached for her hand, his grip firm, grounding. "Stay close to me, Alice. Whatever happens next, We face it together." Her heart surged, her world shifting. At that moment, she knew no matter the cost or the ruin that this was a bond neither lies nor fear could break. The villa walls seemed to whisper secrets louder now. Every glance from Victoria held menace, every smile a mask. Fiona watched with hawk-like hunger as Jeremy spiraled deeper into desperation. And Alice, clutching her father's journal, prepared herself. Because the wedding was no longer just a ceremony. It was the battlefield where truth and lies would collide. The villa awoke restless, as if the walls themselves sensed what was coming. White curtains fluttered in the sea breeze. Sunlight spilled across marble floors, yet beneath the polished beauty lay a pulse of unease that no one could deny. Alice Robinson crept through the hall, clutching her father's journal against her chest like a talisman. She had spent the night rereading his words, each line carving deeper into her soul. "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident." His warning was no longer a whisper from the past. It was the truth rising like a tide. But truth, she knew, was dangerous in this house. She was summoned to the salon, where Victoria Vanderbilt presided over the morning's preparations. Florists carried vases of orchids, suists adjusted gowns, and Fiona twirled in a dress of pale blue, her reflection a constant companion in the gilded mirror. Victoria, draped in silk the color of ivory wine, looked up as Alice entered. Her smile was smooth, but her eyes glittered cold. "My dear," she said sweetly, "how fortunate you are to witness such grandeur." "Do you not think so?" Alice's voice remained steady. "It's impressive." "Impressive," Victoria echoed with mock disappointment. "And yet you look as though you'd rather be anywhere else." Alice clasped her hands to hide their trembling. "I don't wish to intrude, but you already do," Victoria murmured. She leaned forward, her tone sharpened. "You drift like a shadow in Alexander's house, catching his attention when you should not. Do you imagine he sees you? Does he want to see you?" Heat flared in Alice's chest. She met Victoria's gaze, refusing to flinch. "I've never asked for his attention." "Perhaps not," Victoria said coolly. "But some women attract men like moths to flame. And you, Alice, are fire you do not know how to control. Be careful. Flames consume." The warning hung as Fiona laughed behind her, twirling again. Alice excused herself quickly, the journal clutched tighter than before. The afternoon brought little relief. A luncheon was arranged on the terrace with long tables dressed in linen and silver. Guests had begun arriving, early wealthy friends of Alexander's socialites Victoria hoped to impress. Their conversations swirled like smoke-whispered business deals, rehearsed compliments, gossip sweetened with wine. Alice kept to the margins, pouring water when asked, fetching forgotten napkins. Though technically family, she was treated as a servant, her dignity stripped one small gesture at a time. And then it happened. A guest, a woman draped in jewels, leaned toward Victoria and asked, "And who is the lovely young woman lingering near the end? A cousin, perhaps?" Victoria's smile sharpened. "Ah, that is Alice, my late husband's daughter. She is useful, helps with the chores when needed." The words sliced like glass. Laughter fluttered around the table, light and cruel. Alice felt her face flush, her heart hammering. Before she could retreat, Alexander's voice cut through, calm, measured, but unmistakably firm. He said, "She is not a servant," his eyes steady on Alice. "She is a guest, and she deserves respect." The laughter faltered. Silence spread like ripples. Victoria's smile froze, her knuckles whitening around her glass. Alice lowered her gaze, torn between gratitude and dread. His defense had only placed her further in Victoria's sights. She slipped to the cliffs when the luncheon ended, desperate for solitude. The sea roared below, endless and merciless. She let the wind whip through her hair, her breath breaking on the salt air. "Don't let her destroy you," a voice said behind her. Alice turned. It was Noah, King Alexander's son. His expression was softer than his father's, but his eyes held the same piercing blue. "She will try." Noah continued, stepping closer. "Mother has perfected the art of breaking those she cannot control, but you're stronger than you know." Alice managed a small smile. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he said gently. "I see the way you carry yourself, the way you endure without bending. That kind of strength. My father notices too." Her heart stuttered. "And that's the problem." Noah's gaze lingered, thoughtful. "Perhaps. Or it's the answer." Before she could reply, shouts rose from the villa. Jeremy's voice, loud and desperate, arguing again over debts. The illusion of peace was shattered once more. That night, the villa hosted a reception for arriving guests. Music filled the halls. Champagne sparkled in crystal, and laughter masked the tension beneath. Alice wore a simple dress she had bought in town, pale lavender that caught the candlelight. It was nothing compared to the gowns around her, yet somehow she drew eyes. As she crossed the ballroom, she felt their whispers following. Who is she? Why is she here? And then Alexander appeared. In a dark suit, his presence commanded the room without effort. His gaze found hers instantly, and something unspoken passed between them. A tether neither could sever. He moved toward her, each step deliberate, until he stood close enough for her to feel the heat of his breath. "You look beautiful," he murmured. Her cheeks burned. "This isn't my world. It could be," he whispered, his eyes fierce. But before the moment could deepen, Victoria swept in her hand, claiming Alexander's arm. "Darling, the mayor of Athens wishes to speak with you." Her smile at Alice was triumphant venom hidden in silk. Alexander hesitated, his gaze lingering on Alice, but duty pulled him away. Alice stood frozen, her heart aching. Around her, music swelled, couples twirled, and she felt like a statue carved from longing. Later, seeking escape, Alice wandered into the gallery wing of the villa. Paintings of seascapes lined the walls, gilded frames gleaming under soft lights. She paused before one, a storm crashing against rocks, wild and violent, yet beautiful. "It reminds me of you." The voice startled her. Alexander again, stepping from the shadows, untamed. He continued, his eyes burning into hers. Dangerous, yet impossible to look away from. Alice's breath caught. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" he asked quietly. "Because it's true, or because you're afraid of hearing it." Her heart raced. She turned away, desperate to flee, but he caught her hand gently, his touch searing. "Alice," he said, voice low and raw. "I can't keep pretending." The world seemed to hold its breath. She wanted to melt into him, to surrender to the pull that had haunted her since their first meeting. But fear held her back. Fear of Victoria's scandal, losing herself in a fire too fierce. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed. Fiona's voice rang sharp. "Father, are you here?" Alexander released her hand instantly, his face shuddered. Alice fled into the night, her pulse a wild storm. The following day, the journal burned in her thoughts. She could no longer carry the weight alone. She needed to act. She arranged to meet Alexander in the study, pressing the leather-bound book into his hands again. "You have to see it through," she urged. "My father's death. It wasn't what it seemed. He wrote it himself. Victoria may have had a hand." Alexander's face darkened as he read, his jaw tightening. "If this is true, then everything she's built is a lie." "Then end it," Alice pleaded. "Cancel the wedding." But he shook his head, torn. To do so publicly with so many watching, it would ignite scandal. Investors would flee, families would fracture, and Noah, he deserves stability, not chaos. Alice's eyes stung. So you would sacrifice the truth for appearances? He closed the journal, his gaze heavy. Sometimes survival demands sacrifice. Her voice broke. Then we are all already ruined. She turned and fled before he could answer, tears blinding her. That evening, Victoria cornered her in the hallway. Her smile was thin, her voice like ice. You forget yourself, Alice. You forget your place. Alice lifted her chin. My place isn't where you want it to be. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Be careful. I can make your life disappear with a single word. Your tuition, your future, your very name gone. You think Alexander will protect you? He won't. He is mine. Alice's hands clenched at her sides, fury and grief burning together. You may have him in chains, but chains can break. Victoria's laugh was low, cruel. Not these. And if you dare try, you'll regret it. That night, Alice lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small room. The sea roared outside, relentless, unforgiving. She knew then that the battle was no longer just for her dignity. It was for the truth, for her father's memory, for a love she could not deny. And as the villa slept, Alice whispered to the darkness, I will not let her win. The sky above Santorini burned with late afternoon colors, amber, melting into rose shadows, stretching long across the sea. The villa glowed in the waning light, its marble walls reflecting gold, as though determined to disguise the poison festering within. Alice stood at the balcony of her narrow room, clutching the railing. The wind tangled her hair, carrying the faint strains of laughter drifting from the terrace below. Victoria was entertaining guests again, her voice sweet as honey, her smile polished to perfection. Alice had not been invited. It was better that way, she told herself. Each gathering had become another stage for Victoria's performance, another chance to belittle her stepdaughter with carefully veiled remarks. Yet as Alice listened to the distant music, a hollow ache pressed against her ribs. She belonged nowhere, neither to the world of luxury below, nor the life she had left behind. She thought of her father's journal hidden beneath the loose floorboard of her room. His words haunted her. It will not be an accident if anything happens to me. Every time she read them, her conviction deepened. Victoria had stolen more than money. She had stolen life itself. And now, she sought to steal Alexander too. A knock startled her. She turned to find Noah at the door, a tray in his hands. You missed dinner, he said gently. Alice stepped aside, and he entered, placing the tray on the small table, bread, olives, and a slice of roasted lamb. I thought you might be hungry. Thank you, she murmured. He studied her, his gaze thoughtful. You shouldn't let them push you into hiding. You have as much right to be here as any of them. She shook her head. Rights mean little in Victoria's house. Noah's jaw tightened. It won't always be her house. Their eyes met, and Alice saw in him the same fire she glimpsed in Alexander's strength, tempered by quiet resolve. But while Alexander carried the weight of power, Noah had the freedom of choice. I don't know how this will end, Alice admitted softly. Then let it end with the truth, Noah said. No matter how much it hurts. His words lingered long after he left, the scent of roasted lamb cooling the room. The next day, the villa buzzed with final preparations. The wedding loomed and tension thickened like storm clouds. Guests arrived in waves. Politicians, tycoons, socialites, each greeted by Victoria with practiced charm. Alice kept to the shadows, but shadows were thin when eyes sought her out. Whispers followed her in corridors, speculation curling in the air. The stepdaughter, the outsider, The girl, Alexander, defended. And then came the moment that turned whispers into daggers. The family gathered in the main hall for a rehearsal dinner. Long tables gleamed with silver and crystal chandeliers, raining light upon silk gowns. Alice entered quietly, intending only to slip into a corner. But as she did, Fiona's voice rang clear. "Oh, look, the maid decided to join us." Laughter rippled through the hall. Alice froze, humiliation burning her skin. She wanted to retreat, but Alexander rose abruptly from his chair. "Enough," he said, his voice calm, but edged with steel. "Alice is not your servant. She is my guest, and she will be treated with respect." The hall fell silent. Fiona flushed scarlet. Her lips pressed thin. Victoria's smile did not falter, but her eyes flared with fury. Alexander turned to Alice, his expression softening. "Please sit beside me." Her breath caught. To sit at his side before them all was shield and fire. She hesitated, then moved forward, each step a defiance she could scarcely believe she dared. Alexander poured her a glass of wine as she sat, his hand brushing hers deliberately. A quiet gesture, yet it roared louder than any speech. Victoria raised her glass. "To family," she said, her voice silk over steel. "Even the most unexpected of members." The toast rang hollow. Alice sipped only water, her heart pounding with gratitude and dread. Later that night, unable to breathe beneath the weight of eyes and whispers, Alice slipped into the library. The room welcomed her with silence, the faint scent of old books grounding her. She sank into a chair, pressing her face into her hands. "You hide here often," Alexander's voice murmured. She lifted her head. He stood by the door, shadows clinging to him, his presence filling the room. "I like the company of books more than people," she said quietly. He stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Or perhaps people have failed you too many times." Her chest tightened. "Why do you always seek me out?" "Because I can't stay away," he confessed, his voice raw. The words broke something within her. She rose, trembling. "You shouldn't say that. Not when I'm bound to someone else." His eyes darkened. "I know. But every time I look at her, I see calculation. Every time I look at you." He reached, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I see truth." Her breath faltered. The space between them shrank, charged with longing and fear. She wanted to step back, but her body betrayed her, leaning closer. "Alice," he whispered her name, a prayer. And then his lips brushed hers, light as breath, fleeting as a dream. A kiss stolen in silence, yet it set her world ablaze. She pulled away, heart-racing, guilt crashing over desire. "We can't." His voice trembled. "I know. But tell me you don't feel it, and I'll stop." She could not. Silence was her only answer. The following morning, the villa stirred with new energy. Victoria had sensed something. Alice could feel it in the sharpness of her gaze, the way her words dripped with false sweetness. Victoria addressed the table at breakfast, her tone casual but laced with venom. "It's curious, isn't it? How some people insinuate themselves where they do not belong, like weeds in a garden. They drink the water, steal the light, yet contribute nothing." Her eyes flicked to Alice. Alexander set down his cup with a sharp click. "Enough." But Victoria only smiled. "Darling, surely you agree that a garden thrives best when tended carefully. Sometimes weeds must be removed." The implication hung heavy. Alice forced herself to sit still, though her hands trembled beneath the table. That afternoon, Alice walked the gardens alone, the journal hidden in her dress. She traced the stone paths, her mind heavy with choice. She could expose Victoria, destroy the wedding, reveal the truth of her father's words. But doing so would scorch everything, Alexander included. As she stood by the fountain, Fiona approached her steps sharp against the gravel. "Do you enjoy playing the victim?" Fiona sneered. "Everyone whispers about you, the poor stepdaughter, the mysterious girl. But let me tell you the truth. No one will ever see you as more than a shadow." Alice lifted her chin. "Better a shadow than a fraud." Fiona's eyes blazed. "Careful. Mother will not tolerate insolence, and neither will I." With that, she spun on her heel, leaving Alice trembling but unbroken. That evening, Alexander sought her again, this time in the chapel, where the ceremony would be held. Candles flickered in golden pools of light, casting long shadows on the pews. "You shouldn't be here," Alice whispered, her voice catching. "Neither should you," he replied softly, stepping closer. "Yet here we are." Her resolve crumbled under the weight of his gaze. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice breaking. His hand brushed hers, tentative, yet desperate. "We survive the wedding, and then I will make my choice." Tears burned her eyes. "And if that choice destroys us both, then at least it will be honest," he murmured. For a moment, their hands clasped, two souls clinging against the storm. But in the doorway, unseen, a shadow lingered. Victoria. Her smile was thin as she turned away, retreating into the night. The mask had cracked, and Alice knew the war had truly begun. The villa gleamed beneath the late morning sun, its whitewashed walls glowing like a jewel on the cliff. The house was perfect from a distance, a vision of wealth and serenity. Yet within, tension pulsed like a heartbeat too fast to control. Alice felt it the moment she stepped into the grand hall. Guests mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their voices lilting with shallow laughter. But behind their smiles, the air vibrated with whispers. Whispers about her. She caught fragments as she passed the stepdaughter. Too close. Unbecoming. A scandal in the making. Her chest tightened, heat rushing to her face. She longed to retreat, but Victoria's voice rose sharp and clear, commanding the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called, her smile dazzling, her tone honeyed. "Before we continue our celebration, let me introduce a young woman many of you have seen wandering among us. My late husband's daughter, Alice Robinson." The crowd turned as one. Alice froze beneath their stares. Victoria's smile widened. "Alice has been staying with us during this joyous occasion, though she is more accustomed to simpler surroundings. She has been adjusting to our ways." Polite chuckles rippled through the guests. Alice's nails dug into her palms. "She has also been very eager to help," Victoria continued, carrying notes, arranging flowers, serving tea. "Truly, she has been invaluable." The words were framed as praise, but the tone carried venom, reducing Alice to a servant in front of strangers. Heat rose in her throat. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice felt trapped. Then Alexander stepped forward. His presence silenced the room instantly. "That will do, Victoria." His tone was calm, but steel glinted beneath. "Alice is not your servant. She is family." Gasps murmured through the hall. Victoria's smile faltered, though only slightly. "Darling, I was only acknowledging her contributions. You were diminishing her." Alexander cut in, his gaze unwavering. "And I will not allow it." A hush spread, heavy and sharp. The crowd exchanged looks, sensing the fracture behind the glittering facade. Victoria's lips curved again, but her eyes burned. "Of course," she murmured. "As you wish." The gathering resumed with forced laughter, but the damage was done. Alice slipped away, her pulse racing, shame and gratitude tangling in her chest. She found herself in the gardens beneath the shade of an olive tree. The air smelled of thyme and sea salt. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. "Are you all right?" Her eyes opened. Alexander stood before her, concern etched across his face. "You shouldn't have defended me like that," she whispered. It only made things worse. I won't stand by while she humiliates you, he said firmly. But you risk everything, Alice murmured, her voice breaking. Your reputation, your future, even Noah's respect. Alexander stepped closer, his gaze fierce. What is the worth of a reputation if it means silencing truth? What is the cost of a future built on lies? Her chest ached. And what of this wedding? His jaw tightened. Each day it feels more like a prison. For a moment, silence enveloped them, broken only by the rustle of leaves. Then, unable to resist, Alexander reached for her hand. His touch was fire, dangerous, undeniable. Alice's breath caught, but she did not pull away. If I could free us both, he whispered, I would. Her lips trembled. And if you cannot, then I will burn the cage myself. That night the villa hosted another dinner, this one more intimate, reserved for family and closest allies. The table glittered with crystal and silver candle flames, flickering in golden pools. Alice sat quietly at the far end, her dress simple among gowns that shimmered like jewels. She tried to ignore the stares, the half-smiles. But then Victoria rose, glass in hand. A toast, she announced, her voice smooth. To unity, to trust, to the bonds that hold families together. The words were pointed. Her eyes, sharp as daggers, landed on Alice. Yet trust, Victoria continued, is fragile. Once broken, it may never be mended. A murmur of agreement rippled. Alice's stomach clenched. She knew what was coming. Victoria set down her glass and smiled sweetly. And what is more fragile than appearances? Rumors travel quickly, do they not? A look, a whisper, a stolen moment, and suddenly questions arise. The table stilled. Alexander's hand tightened around his glass. Victoria's smile sharpened. Questions about loyalty, about propriety, about where one's affections truly lie. The silence was suffocating. Alice felt every gaze turned toward her, heavy with implication. Her chest constricted. She wanted to speak, to deny, but fear held her tongue. Then Alexander's voice rang clear. Enough. His tone was low, dangerous. This ends now. Victoria tilted her head, feigning innocence. I only meant to remind us all of the importance of honor. Alexander's eyes burned. You meant to humiliate her. Again. Gasps echoed, tension coiled tight, the fragile mask of civility splintering. Alice rose abruptly, her voice trembling. Please, stop. I will not be the cause of this. And before anyone could stop her, she fled the hall, tears burning hot against her cheeks. She ran until her breath failed, finding herself at the chapel by the cliffs. Candles flickered faintly within the scent of wax and salt lingering. She sank to a pew, burying her face in her hands. The door creaked. Alexander entered, his steps heavy, his face shadowed by anguish. Alice, he whispered. She shook her head. You should not be here, not after that. I cannot let her destroy you, he said fiercely. But she already has. Her voice broke. The whispers, the stares, they will never stop. You'll lose everything because of me. He dropped to one knee beside her, his hand covering hers. Then let me lose it. I would rather stand in ruins with you than live in a palace built on lies. Her tears spilled, her heart splitting open. You can't mean that. His gaze held hers unflinching. I do more than I have meant anything in my life. And before fear could intervene, he kissed her. This kiss was no fleeting brush. It was desperate, consuming, a confession poured into touch. The world melted away, leaving only them two souls bound by a fire that refused to be extinguished. When they parted, breathless, Alice whispered, What happens now? Alexander's eyes darkened. Now we survive until the wedding, and then I will break free. But in the shadows of the chapel, unseen by either, Fiona lingered, her face pale, her eyes wide with revelation. She turned silently and slipped away, a storm of opportunity brewing in her mind. The following morning, whispers spread faster than wildfire. Guests exchanged knowing glances. Servants avoided Alice's eyes. The story was out, the bride's stepdaughter and the groom, too close, too familiar. Victoria confronted Alice in the gallery, her smile gone, her voice cold as marble. "You think you are clever," she hissed. "But I warned you, and now you have given me exactly what I needed." Alice's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Proof, Victoria whispered. "Enough to destroy you. Enough to shatter any chance Alexander would dare protect you." Alice's heart pounded. "He knows the truth. He knows what you are." Victoria laughed softly, chillingly. "And who will believe you? A poor girl clinging to dreams, or me, the woman standing at his side, soon to be his wife? Which story will the world prefer?" The words cut deep, but Alice lifted her chin. "I will not be silenced. Not this time." Victoria's eyes narrowed, fury sparking. "Then prepare to lose everything." That evening, Alexander sought Alice once more. He found her in the gardens, the journal clutched in her trembling hands. "I cannot do this anymore," she whispered. "She will destroy me, and she will kill you too." He stepped closer, cupping her face gently. "Let her try. She underestimates us both." Her tears shimmered in the fading light. "But what if she's right? What if the world will never believe me?" His voice was fierce, unwavering. "Then let the world fall away. I believe you, and that is enough." Her heart broke and healed in the same breath. For in his eyes, she saw not just desire, not just defiance, but faith that bound them tighter than any chain Victoria could forge. And yet, in the villa's windows above, Victoria watched. Her smile was gone. Her war had begun. The villa awoke with a hum of restless energy, its marble corridors alive with the footsteps of servants, the flutter of silks, the clipped voices of planners. The wedding was no longer a distant promise. It loomed like a heavy, unstoppable storm cloud on the horizon. Alice felt it pressing down on her with every breath. Each glance she received from the staff was weighted half pity, half judgment. Rumors had spread faster than she could hope to contain them. She could almost hear the whispers trailing behind her as she passed the stepdaughter. The scandal. The forbidden. She kept to herself, moving like a shadow through the villa. But shadows were hunted now. That afternoon, Victoria called a gathering in the great hall. The family stood at the center, surrounded by a select group of guests, wealthy allies whose approval she could not risk losing. Alice entered hesitantly, sensing the trap before it revealed itself. Radiant in emerald silk, Victoria raised her glass with a smile that gleamed like polished steel. "Friends," she began, her voice smooth, commanding. "It has come to my attention that whispers circulate in this house, rumors that if left unchecked, might tarnish the joy of our union." The room's stilled breath held. Victoria's gaze slid deliberately to Alice. "It concerns a young woman who has perhaps mistaken her place." A ripple of murmurs followed. Alice's stomach twisted. "She is my late husband's daughter," Victoria continued sweetly. "And though I have tried to guide her, I fear grief has made her reckless. In her loneliness, she has sought affection where none should be sought with my fiancé." The words detonated like thunder. Gasps erupted, eyes swinging to Alice sharp with accusation. Alice's chest constricted. Heat seared her cheeks, shame flooding her veins. She wanted to scream, to deny, but her voice was lost beneath the roar of whispers. Then Alexander rose. His expression was unreadable, his shoulders squared. Enough. The hall was silent. Alexander's gaze swept the room before landing firmly on Victoria. If you seek to protect your reputation, do not do it by destroying hers. Alice has done nothing wrong. Victoria's smile did not falter, though fury sparked in her eyes. Alexander, darling, surely you don't mean to dismiss what everyone has seen. I mean to dismiss lies, he said coldly. And if anyone dares repeat them, they answer to me. The tension snapped like glass. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, some staring at the floor. Victoria inclined her head, masking rage with grace. As you wish, she murmured, but her eyes, when they found Alice, promised war. That night, the villa felt like a battlefield. Alice lay awake in her narrow bed, her heart pounding with humiliation and gratitude tangled together. She replayed Alexander's defense in her mind, how his voice had cut through the noise, and how he had stood for her when no one else would. But the cost was heavy. Victoria would not forgive, and the whispers would not fade. A soft knock startled her. She rose, opening the door, to find Alexander standing in the dim corridor. His face shadowed, his eyes burning. "Walk with me," he whispered. They slipped out into the gardens, the night air cool against their skin. Lanterns glowed faintly among olive trees, casting pools of gold on the stone path. Alice hugged her arms around herself. "You shouldn't have defended me like that. Now she'll never stop." "I don't care what she does," Alexander said fiercely. "I care about you." Her breath caught. "Alexander." He reached for her hand, pulling her closer. "I won't let her destroy you. I won't let her bury you beneath lies. If I must choose between her reputation and your truth, I choose you." Tears burned her eyes. "But what of your name, your empire?" "The scandal. Let it come," he whispered, his voice raw. "For the first time in my life I see clearly, and I will not turn away." Their lips met, urgent and desperate, a kiss that spoke of defiance and devotion, of a love too strong to silence. When they parted breathless, Alice pressed her forehead to his. "This will end us." His gaze held hers. "No, this will free us." The next morning, retaliation came swiftly. Victoria summoned Alice to the drawing room. The curtains were drawn, shadows cloaking the space. Fiona lounged on the chaise, her expression smug, while Jeremy paced, his phone clutched in sweaty hands. Victoria sat poised in her chair, her posture regal, her eyes glacial. "Alice," she said softly, "I have been patient, but your behavior leaves me no choice." Alice stood tall, though her pulse raced. "I've done nothing to shame you." Victoria's smile was cold. "And yet shame clings to you like a shadow. The guests speak of it, the staff whispers of it, and Alexander." Her eyes narrowed. "Alexander dares to defend you. Do you not see the danger you pose?" Alice's hands clenched. "The danger I pose is only to your lies." Fiona gasped. Jeremy muttered a curse. Victoria rose slowly, her presence filling the room. "You will leave. Today. Quietly. I will arrange for your tuition to be covered elsewhere, far from here. You will not speak of Alexander again. You will not speak of me. If you comply, you may still salvage a future." Alice's breath trembled. "And if I refuse?" Victoria's smile sharpened. "Then I will ruin you. Publicly, utterly. The world will believe me, not you. You will be nothing." Alice's heart pounded. But beneath the fear, something hardened. She thought of her father's journal, of Alexander's words in the garden, of the fire that had been lit between them. I won't leave, she whispered. Not until the truth is known. Victoria's eyes blazed. Then you've chosen your destruction. That evening, Alice found Alexander in the study. He looked up from his desk, concern etching his face. She tried to send me away, Alice whispered, her voice breaking. She said she'd ruin me if I stayed. Alexander rose instantly, crossing to her, his hands cupping her face. She will not touch you. Not while I live. Her tears fell freely now, his thumb brushing them away. I don't know if I can fight her. You don't have to fight her alone, he murmured. We stand together, always. And in that moment, Alice believed him. But elsewhere in the villa, Victoria plotted. She sat in her private chamber, her reflection in the mirror, calm, composed, regal. Yet inside, fury roared. She had underestimated Alice's resolve, underestimated Alexander's defiance. That mistake would not be made again. Fiona, she said softly, her eyes never leaving the mirror. It's time we remind our dear guest what happens when she overreaches. Fiona's lips curved in a cruel smile. Please leave it to me. The following day brought the first strike. Alice entered the dining hall to find guests whispering louder than ever. At the center of the table lay a photograph, grainy, stolen, but damning. It showed Alice and Alexander in the chapel, their hands clasped, their faces far too close. Gasps filled the room as eyes turned on her sharp with condemnation. Alice's breath faltered. This isn't... But the whispers drowned her. Shameful, reckless, a betrayal. Victoria rose, her expression grave, her voice trembling with false sorrow. I had hoped to keep this private to shield Alice from disgrace, but the truth reveals itself. Her eyes glistened, her performance flawless. My fiancé has been compromised by misplaced affection. My stepdaughter, confused by grief, has mistaken kindness for love. The guests nodded, murmuring sympathy for her and judgment for Alice. Alice's vision blurred with tears, her chest burning. Then Alexander stood, his voice cut through the din, fierce and unyielding. Enough. This is not her shame. It is mine for not ending this farce sooner. The hall fell silent. Alexander's gaze swept the room, daring any to oppose him. Then he turned to Alice, his voice softer but no less confident. I will not marry you, Victoria. The words detonated, shattering the air. Gasps, cries, the clatter of glasses. Victoria's mask, cracked fury blazing in her eyes. You dare humiliate me. I dare speak the truth, Alexander said coldly. This charade ends now. And before them all, he reached for Alice's hand. The world might burn, but she was no longer afraid. The villa was no longer a palace. It was a furnace. The moment Alexander's voice declared the wedding over, silence had cracked like fragile glass, and then the hall erupted. Guests rose from their chairs, in shock, voices colliding, glasses shattering on marble, as whispers turned to shouts. Some demanded answers, others slipped away, desperate to avoid scandal's shadow. And at the center of it all stood Victoria, her emerald gown shimmering under the chandeliers, her face twisted into something that no longer resembled charm. You humiliate me in front of everyone, she hissed, her voice low but seething. You destroy everything we built with one foolish declaration. Alexander's expression was cold steel. There was nothing to destroy. It was built on lies. Victoria's hand trembled on her glass. For a moment, Alice thought she might throw it, might strike him before them all. But instead, Victoria straightened her mask of grace, slipping back into place, though her eyes burned with fire. Very well, she said, her voice honeyed with venom. If you will not honor your vows, I will show the world who you truly are. A man weak enough to fall for a girl who clings to him like a beggar. And she... Her gaze slashed toward Alice. will be remembered as the shadow who ruined an empire." The words hung like daggers in the air. The guests scattered quickly after whispers trailing through the corridors like smoke. By the time the villa emptied, silence fell heavy, oppressive. Alice stood in the grand hall, her hands trembling, her heart pounding like she had run for miles. Alexander approached his presence, steady grounding. "You should not have done it," she whispered, her throat tight. "Not like that. Before everyone. It had to be done," he said firmly. Her eyes stung. "But they'll never forgive you. The investors, the allies, Victoria will poison them all. Let them," he said, his voice low. "I will not live chained to her lies." Alice's tears fell then hot against her cheeks. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms, and for a moment the world's collapse faded into the steady beat of his heart. The next morning, chaos reigned. Newspapers arrived at the villa gates before dawn, headlines screaming scandal. Billionaire breaks engagement at the altar. Stepdaughter at the center of betrayal. Empire on the brink of collapse. Alice read one from the corner of the breakfast table, her stomach twisting with every cruel word. A Cinderella story turned sordid. One line read, "Alice Robinson, the obscure stepdaughter, appears to have ensnared Alexander King, destroying one of society's most anticipated unions." Her hands shook as she set the paper down. Fiona smirked from across the room. "Fame suits you," Fiona drawled, "though perhaps not the kind you wanted." Alice's throat closed, but before she could reply, Alexander entered. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. "Enough," he said sharply, his gaze locking on Fiona. "Not another word." Fiona shrugged, but her smile lingered. Later, in the quiet of the study, Alice confronted him. "You're losing everything," she whispered, "because of me." He turned from the window, his gaze piercing. "I am losing chains. There is a difference. But your name, your power, none of it matters without truth." He interrupted, "And none of it matters without you." Her breath caught. She wanted to argue, to insist he save himself, but his voice silenced every doubt. "You are not my ruin, Alice. You are my salvation." The words shattered her walls, leaving only raw, aching love. Victoria did not leave quietly. She precisely staged her revenge, calling the press into her suite, her words dripping with wounded dignity. She spoke of betrayal, of kindness, twisted of a young girl she had taken in, only to be repaid with treachery. "She is confused," Victoria told the cameras, her eyes glistening with false tears. "Grief can do terrible things. I pity her honestly. But she has destroyed more than my wedding. She has destroyed Alexander's legacy." The footage spread like wildfire, painting Alice as the villain of a story she had never wanted. Strangers spat her name online. Articles tore her apart, and everywhere she turned, judgment followed. One evening, she returned from the village market, whispers hissing in her wake, only to collapse into Alexander's arms when she entered the villa. "I can't breathe," she sobbed. "Everywhere I go, it's there. Their eyes, their words." He held her close, his voice fierce. "Then let me be your shield. Let them speak. We will outlast them." But she wondered, how long could love withstand the world's weight? The days blurred into battle. Investors withdrew, deals crumbled, and Alexander's empire trembled. Once a symbol of triumph, the villa became a fortress under siege. Jeremy vanished into debts. Fiona sulked with venom in her eyes, and Victoria, though gone, lingered in every headline, every whisper. Alice felt the walls closing in. She wanted to be strong and carry herself with dignity, but every look reminded her of her father's warning in the journal: trust no one, especially her. And yet, she had trusted Alexander, with her heart, her life. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, she found him on the balcony, his silhouette framed against the dying light. Tell me honestly, she whispered, stepping beside him. Do you regret it? Ending it with her and choosing me? He turned his eyes fierce, unflinching. Never. Her breath trembled. Even if it destroys everything. His hand cupped her cheek, his touch steady. Then let it destroy everything. I would rather build a new world with you than reign over an empire built on lies. Her tears spilled, but they were not despair. They were of love so deep it frightened her. But Victoria's war was not finished. 2 nights later, a courier delivered an envelope addressed to Alexander. Inside were copies of contracts, deeds, investments, all tied to Victoria's hand. Each one laced with poison clauses that could bankrupt him if pursued. And at the bottom, a note in her elegant script, marry me or lose it all. You have until the wedding day. Alexander's jaw tightened as he read the paper, trembling in his grip. Alice watched, her chest aching. She'll destroy you, Alice whispered. He looked up, his eyes burning. Not if I destroy her first. Her pulse quickened. What do you mean? We expose her, he said. Everything. The debts, the lies, the journal. We burn her empire before she burns ours. Fear knotted in Alice's chest. She'll come after me harder than ever. Then we stand together, he said, gripping her hand. Always. And for the first time, Alice believed they could. The night before, what should have been the wedding, the villa was eerily quiet. Guests had left, contracts lay in ruins, and the air carried the heaviness of war's eve. Alice wandered into the chapel, her steps echoing against the stone. She knelt at the pew where she and Alexander had once sat, clasping her hands tightly. Father, she whispered into the silence. I don't know if I am strong enough, but I will not run, not anymore. Tears fell onto the wood, but in her heart fire rose. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to find Alexander standing in the doorway. His face shadowed, his eyes soft. Praying, he asked gently. She smiled faintly through tears, pleading. He crossed the aisle, taking her hand, lifting her to her feet. You are stronger than you know, and tomorrow we end this, together. Her breath trembled as his arms wrapped around her, steady as stone, warm as fire. And though the world outside plotted their downfall in that moment, she felt invincible. The morning dawned with crimson skies, a storm brewing over the sea. The villa braced for the reckoning to come. Victoria had issued her ultimatum. Alexander had made his choice. And Alice, caught between ruin and love, steeled herself for the battle to decide everything. The empire might burn, their names might fall to ash, but in the ashes, something greater waited: freedom, and perhaps the beginning of forever. The storm broke with the dawn. Winds howled across the cliffs, waves battered the rocks, and the villa stood against the tempest like a citadel besieged. It was as though nature had decided to mirror the chaos inside its walls. Alice stood at the tall windows of the library, watching the sky bruise purple and gray, her heart a storm of its own. Behind her, the faint echo of hurried footsteps and raised voices filled the halls. Today was no longer about wedding vows. Today was about truth. She pressed her father's journal to her chest, the words etched into her soul. Trust no one, especially her. He had been right. And yet, in defying that warning, she had found something worth more than survival. She had found love. Alexander entered his presence as steady as the stone walls around them. He was dressed not in a suit, but a dark coat, his expression carved from resolve. It's time, he said softly. Alice turned, her breath trembling. Can we win? His gaze held hers, unwavering. This isn't about winning. It's about ending the lie. Whatever comes after, at least it will be real. She nodded. Her fear coiled tight, but her resolve was stronger still. The confrontation began in the grand hall beneath chandeliers that swayed in the storm's wind. The family gathered, Fiona tense and pale, Jeremy shifting nervously, Victoria poised in crimson silk, her smile sharp as a blade. Alexander stood tall at the head of the hall, Alice beside him, the journal clutched in her hand. Enough of this charade. Alexander declared, his voice carrying through the chamber. Victoria, you sought to chain me with deceit. You sought to destroy her with lies no more. Gasps rippled among the lingering guests, those brave or curious enough to remain after the scandal. Victoria's smile widened, her eyes glinting. So dramatic, darling. Do you think the world will believe the ramblings of a girl desperate for your affection? Alice stepped forward, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. They will believe the truth. She opened the journal, her father's words trembling on her lips. If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident. Trust no one, especially her. The room stilled. Murmurs rose like smoke. Victoria laughed, but the sound rang hollow. A dead man's paranoia. That is your grand proof. But Alexander pulled another folder from beneath his coat. Documents, contracts, statements. Jeremy had signed, all marked with Victoria's name. Not just his words, Alexander said coldly. Her crimes. The debts, the blackmail, the manipulation. All laid bare. Jeremy's face blanched, his voice cracking. You told me. Silence, Victoria hissed. But her mask was crumbling, her composure slipping. You murdered my father. Alice whispered, her voice breaking. For power. For money. And now you try to do the same to Alexander. The words struck like thunder. Guests recoiled, whispers growing frantic. Victoria's facade shattered. Rage twisted her features, raw and unmasked. And what if I did, she spat. Your father was weak, clinging to his little accounts and dreams. I gave him greatness and took what was mine when he failed me. And you, her eyes burned into Alice's. You were always nothing. A shadow. A mistake. Alice's breath caught pain searing through her. But before despair could claim her, Alexander's voice cut through, fierce as fire. You are wrong, he said, stepping between them. She is everything, and she is mine. Gasps erupted. The declaration was undeniable, irrevocable. Victoria's fury boiled over. She lunged toward Alice, her hands clawed like talons. But Alexander caught her wrist midair, his strength unyielding. Enough, he said coldly. This ends here. The guardsman, loyal not to Victoria, but to Alexander, stepped forward. She thrashed, spitting venom, but her power was gone, her mask destroyed. Fiona shrank back in horror, and Jeremy slumped in defeat. And at last, Victoria Vanderbilt was led from the hall, her empire collapsing with every step. Silence followed, broken only by the storm outside. Alice stood trembling, the journal still clutched in her hand. She felt hollow, like her strength had poured out with the confrontation. Alexander turned to her, his eyes soft now, no longer steel. He reached for her hand, holding it gently. It's over, he whispered. Tears blurred her vision. Is it? He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. The lie is over. What comes next? We will build together. Her heart broke open, then love flooding through the cracks. She fell into his arms, and for the first time she felt free. The storm passed by dawn. The villa, though battered, stood in new light. Guests had departed, whispers carrying into the world, but the weight of deceit was gone inside its walls. Alice walked the gardens with Alexander, the olive trees, swaying gently in the morning breeze. For the first time in days, she could breathe. You've lost much, she said softly. He shook his head. I've lost nothing that mattered, and I've gained everything that does." Her lips curved faintly. "And what if the world still judges us?" "Then let them," he said. "We owe the world nothing, but I owe you everything." Her breath caught tears rising again, but they were tears of joy this time. They paused at the edge of the cliffs, the sea stretching endlessly before them. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "Alice Robinson," he said, his voice steady, "reverent from the moment you walked into my world. You brought truth where there were lies, fire where there was ash. I am nothing without you. Will you stand beside me, not as scandal or shadow, but as my future?" Her heart soared, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her, then the sun breaking over the horizon, painting them in gold. And for the first time, there was no fear, only love. Months later, the world still spoke their names. Some whispered scandal, others spoke of redemption. But for Alice and Alexander, none of it mattered. Their life was no longer measured by gossip or wealth, but by shared morning's truths spoken and love unbroken. The empire had fallen. They built something greater from its ashes, a home, a family, a forever. And though their story had begun in shadows, it ended in light. If you've walked with Alice and Alexander through every storm and felt the ache of their secrets and the fire of their love, their story has already touched you. It is more than a tale of scandal and power. It is a reminder. Truth is worth fighting for. Love is worth risking for, and even in ruins, new worlds can be built. If their journey moved, you don't let it end here. Share this story. Let others feel the fire of a love that defied lies and the strength of a woman who refused to be silenced. And if you believe in love that burns brighter than scandal and courage that outlasts betrayal, join us, subscribe, follow, and never stop believing in stories that change hearts. Because somewhere right now, another Alice is waiting for her to dawn.